The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Here we go. All Out is this weekend here in the Wrestling is Real podcast. We're going to go and talk about it, and we will be doing a post show for that coming up this Sunday after the show's over. Make sure to check out for that. I know a lot of people will be looking out for that. This is that weekend where after SummerSlam and after a really wonderful NWA weekend, here we are with a moment that the true direction that the new Wrestling Alliance, not National Wrestling Alliance, but the new Wrestling Alliance is doing right now. It's very important to go ahead and put into context what's happening here. This is one of the biggest shows to date that AEW will ever have because of CM Punk returning to wrestling in his first professional wrestling match, going back 7 years. And you could say before that, the way he kind of put it out, saying his last match was the Ring of Honor in professional wrestling. But it's a very stacked card. So when you look at what AEW and WWE are doing right now, so AEW, they stack their cards for these quarterly pay-per-views, and they are so stacked. There's just so much going on. There's so many matches to look forward to this weekend. I'm going to run through the card and just look at the names that they have. Like, really, there's just matches. I just want to point out ones that just stand out to me a lot. So they built up Kenny Omega and Christian Cage for the AEW World Title wonderfully. For what they were able to do when Hangman Adam Page could not be the one that was taking on Kenny Omega, which eventually that's going to be the match. We know that. Christian Cage, the way they built it up, winning the Impact World Title on the first episode of Rampage, all the way to now, and how Christian Cage has gotten the comeuppance. He's taken a scalp or two from Kenny Omega, and only for Kenny Omega to use the power of the Elite to completely destroy him prior to their AEW World Title match, because Kenny Omega is now in the desperation mode saying, there's no way I can let Christian Cage win. I can't let him take another strap. There's just no way it's going to happen. And that's what they want to explain here. An excellent storyline. It's been very well done. Helping with, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus being trying to help out. Like the ending of tonight's Dynamite, it wasn't really just so much Christian Cage being stuck there by himself. He did have allies in Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus coming out to his aid, but they were taken down. The Lucha Brothers in the match they were in were taken down as well. So Christian overcome, being the last of the casualties by the Elite, being able to go ahead and then isolate Christian Cage and then really just destroy him prior to the match. Really well done. So you got that match, just looks fantastic. Britt Baker, Chris Statlander, there hasn't been a whole lot where those two have really faced odds, but we know that Britt Baker's been trying to be very protective of what happens to her. And the way that Chris Statlander has been built up, undefeated, to get up and take this shot against Britt Baker as number one contender. Young Bucks, Lucha Brothers, nice job of the Championship Contender Tournament to lead up to this. In a steel cage. We don't get those many. The last one was Blood and Guts, but they don't do it a lot. They don't do it a whole lot. What looks like is the main event, Chris Jericho versus MJF. As Jericho loses, he'll never wrestle on AEW again. Well, that in itself, we're culminating a storyline that's been going on for months upon months. The real essence of the Pinnacle versus Inner Circle feud is right there in front of everybody. Like those four matches right there, the three of those four matches are absolutely those are great. Those are like main events on Dynamite or anything else. The women's match is good, but that's a women's division that AEW is still trying to build up. They're trying to make more of it. The Women's Casino Battle Royal, which was going to be the buy-in, now got moved to the main event because of a change where Pac and Andrade will not be able to face each other, even though that storyline has been built up. That'll be held over. Unfortunately, their travel will not be able to be done for both of them to go and make their way over here, so that's unfortunate. Casino Battle Royal, Nyla Rose, Big Swole, Diamante, Julia Hart, Penelope Ford, Red Velvet, Tay Conti, Thunder Rosa, The Bunny, Emi Sakura, Hikaru Shida, Kira Hogan, Abaddon, Kylan King, Layla Hirsch. Pretty good. And in a battle royal, there's some good names in this, and a number of names that I could see that could do really well in this match that I'd like to see that would come out. When you look at Thunder Rosa, look at Tay Conti, Nyla Rose. I mean, those are the names that look at, to me, that look like are most possible to, or the Bunny, that could come out of the Battle Royal winning it. AEW TNT Championship, Miro defends against Eddie Kingston. Instant feud right there. Eddie Kingston being put on the pay-per-view. Wonderful. The match with Paul White, QT Marshall. Look, I mean, it's not anything that's like over the top, but, they're trying to build something, and Paul White wants to have a match. This is where his first entry into it is. I mean, the QT Marshall thing shouldn't take too long. It's not bad. Like, it's kind of a dark feud with a little bit of what they've done with Dynamite and how they put it together. I mean, they put a story to it. Is it like a over the top? Well, not every story is going to be that great. That's where I kind of, I'll give it a pass. Like, the match should be okay, but I'll give it a pass because it's not anything that's like overly vested in. John Moxley, Satoshi Kojima. Look, I know people don't want to talk about this much, but Kojima, the first ever MLW World Heavyweight Champion, and he came on the Impact Wrestling, so we saw him in a recent appearance. He still can go, regardless of what everybody says. Nobody understands the feud or the background of Kojima and what he's gone through. Even I don't know that much. But I know this guy's New Japan guy. It's a chance to come in here. It's representation, most importantly. And then the other match everybody's going to be talking about is CM Punk in his first match back against Darby Allin. They should get some time, and that should be a fun-ass match. That's going to be good. There's a lot of matches to look at. Like, really, a good 6-7 matches I'm really vested interest in. That really have me excited in this card. It is pretty well packed. And they have to do that. Meanwhile, WWE at its mediocre best, at SummerSlam, they did give us, about 3 or 4, maybe 3 matches, I think, that were very solid. To me, anyway. I mean, they did have some eventful things with return of Brock Lesnar and Becky Lynch. The Bianca Belair Sasha Banks intended SmackDown Women's title match would have been great. The rematch would have been great. The way they did it was not. Lashley Goldberg, it was a train wreck. That is because Goldberg just cannot hang. Not at this age. You just can't keep him putting out there, expect him to do well. Like, he's got to do much shorter matches, if at all. Or tag. But this is not working. But Goldberg is not meant to be that. He's a singles guy. He's meant to be in, the power moves. You're expecting him to do something that he can't do anymore. Maybe in a couple of years ago he could still do it, but not now. In his 50s? You're asking for too much of this guy. And that's what's going on there. Now, and then the other one was, for me also was, Reigns and Cena. Damn. Like, hell of a match. So you had a handful of matches that would have been really solid to watch at SummerSlam, but with All Out, like, I got about more than half the card I'm invested in. And I'm not looking like I'm going to be bored or I'm going to be, feel like I need to take a bathroom break during All Out, because there's nothing like that. Looks like it's going to be like that to me anyway. I mean, even the Women's Battle Royal looks interesting to me. They got some good names in there. And most importantly, AEW has done an excellent job of building storylines across the board. They take time to go through everything. And now that they have Rampage, even more so. And that's what it is. Actually, what's interesting in that Battle Royal, they did not show Jade Cargill here, did they? I don't think she was even added. But I'm sure she's got to be in there. Kind of surprised I didn't see that name in there, but okay. And then also, even the fact that leading up to this pay-per-view, like last week, they might have put some matches out there. They had the Wingmen and they had, Varsity Blondes. Kind of been like, you see a little bit of them. You don't see much of the Wingmen. You might see a little bit of Varsity Blondes here and there, which is a good team. A good setup for them. Especially when I'm, big into Brian Pillman Jr., and I think Julia Hart, there's something there about her. She fits the role of the cheerleader perfectly. And Griff Garrison, I just got to get more behind. but I feel like Brian Pillman Jr. is the Shawn Michaels of this team, and Griff Garrison's Marty Jannetty. I just need to see more out of Griff Garrison. But then again, I watched so much of Brian Pillman Jr. We want him to succeed. I know he will succeed. Brian Pillman Jr. is damn good. For his age, he was part of Hart Foundation. It was fantastic. And to get here, I want to see him do well. I mean, no matter what. You want to put him in a tag team? Sure. But Brian Pillman Jr. has got the goods. He's really good. MLW, they showcased him extremely well. And he was great. Middleweight champion at one point. He was really fun to watch. And not a bad promo. And the stuff they did with him and Kevin Sullivan, it was good. Like, the short amount of time he was in MLW told me a lot. So nobody's really probably watched enough of MLW to see what Brian Pillman Jr. did to make it over here to AEW, but that's what I look at for that. And stipulations matter. You know, you see the reason where MJF decides to take the match after the 5 Libras and take another rematch, and MJF getting ready to go and try to silence the legend, like take him out. The story being told was excellent. Both Jericho and MJF, monster promos tonight. Excellent work. Really, really great stuff. Chris Jericho, whole hardcore babyface. MJF, monster heel. What a classic. That match, I felt like could steal the show. I know Young Bucks and Lucha Brothers, you could put that at the top, whatever you want to do. That's going to be an amazing match, especially when they even have a steel cage to kind of work off of. That gimmick's going to be really work well. I feel really good about Miro and Eddie Kingston. Like, there's just a lot of good matches. There's a lot to say. Plus, they're not every month. Even better. And the fact that AEW and Impact Wrestling and all the other organizations have not chosen to go up like WCW did and do monthly pay-per-views. To be honest, I know WWE can't do it. Like, they can't cut an hour off of Raw. They can't cut down the amount of pay-per-views. They'd rather just add more. That's the amount of the amount of content they have to put out is always going to drown the quality. But in the other way around, the New Wrestling Alliance, when you look at NWA, they talked about Hard Times 2 is coming in December. So you got a while before you get to that. You got quarterly pay-per-views that are significantly important, the pillars of Impact Wrestling. Meanwhile, the monthly pay-per-views, yes, they build to them, the Impact Plus, but they're not, you know, you kind of know that, yeah, you're getting great matches out of it. You're almost going to get like a very good episode of Impact Wrestling on Access, but, you know, there's never anything that necessarily happens in a title change on these pay-per-views. But what they're doing is they're taking their Impact Plus system and what they're doing on YouTube and monetizing it. They're cheap pay-per-views. That's okay. You get the $7 a month with the Impact Plus. You get those pay-per-views just like you're getting with the WWE Network. You're getting their pay-per-views. It's the same idea. And then extra content on top of that. And their libraries. That's not bad. So you got that going for you. So Impact Wrestling doing the same thing. They're kind of embedded in the old format that they had before. What AEW never did it. Tony Khan, you know, has done a smart thing by keeping the pay-per-views as it is. Double or Nothing, Full Gear, All Out, and Revolution. Just monster. Great stuff. And those pay-per-views just kick ass to me. I really enjoy them. And I know a lot of the fans enjoy it too. And I want to talk about what the fans feel like about this. So, on the previous episode of the Resurgence podcast, episode 629, when I specifically called the episode WWE versus the New Wrestling Alliance. One of the first times I actually used that term to determine everybody. And I think this is back on June 30th was when I put that episode up. So it's been a few episodes ago. Or it might have been July, I forget. Actually, I think it was July 30th. Now, a commenter named JB on my YouTube feed put up a very long comment. And I think the excitement that he has here, it's pretty... I mean, I'd like to read this out for you. Let's let's take what he says, because he really does go in through all the aspect of what I've been talking about since January about this formation of what is now the New Wrestling Alliance. If you do not know, you just listen to the program. It's me talking about AEW, Impact Wrestling, NWA, which, if you didn't catch my post show, I did a post show for Empower and NWA 73. Trevor Murdoch, your new world's heavyweight champion. Great stuff. The shows were really fun, and I enjoyed talking about it. Did a post show about 30 minutes long. Go ahead and look for that right here at WrestlingIsReal.com. I already put it up there. Make sure to catch it if you have not listened to it yet. People in the YouTube feed definitely going in and caught a little bit of it, which was nice. And I don't get a whole lot of big numbers on YouTube, I know. But you can see people were kind of threading the needle. People were a little bit more interested. Got a few more downloads this time around, which was nice. And some people actually did respond to my post show, because we don't talk about much about the NWA. And there's not many podcasts that would. There was nobody else. There wasn't many others that were doing NWA content, NWA post shows after the show. There's not much of that going on. But I did. So, AEW, Impact Wrestling, NWA, New Japan, AAA. That's huge. So, the fantasy booking that this commenter goes through, let's just read this. He says, brilliant what Tony Khan and AEW is doing. So many ways this thing can go. This is literally like the Justice League of promotions. This is what Pro Wrestling USA should have been, which I think that's the Mass Maniac. What was his name again? Frank? I forget. But yeah, I think that's what it was. It was, I forget. It was the one that used to host with, that Anthony Blasey would host with him. And I forgot his name. It was Frank something. I forgot. Frank Goodrich? Gooden? Oh, I forgot. I should go and look it up real quick just to be, proper about it. Frank Goodman. There we go. Frank Goodman. That was the one that used to run the Pro Wrestling USA shows, which actually happened in Orlando as well. I never got to catch those shows myself. Now, JB goes on to say, in this case, Khan doing the Forbidden Door is frankly genius. For me, one of the most intriguing things that could happen is the resurgence of the NWA because of this. I think Billy Corgan is going to have to take a look at the bigger picture and get the NWA World Title on a Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, MJF, John Moxley, etc. at some point. AEW stars could appear in the NWA. NWA stars can appear on AEW. I knew this was going to happen to an extent, but I'm really going in on this thing. We could really see Danielson versus Punk over the NWA World Title in front of 30 to 50,000 people. I truly think this is doable. From there, Corgan's core NWA guys can beat one of them down the road, and they can be much larger names. Now, I don't see where NWA is going to get that kind of a rub, because I think the talent exchange that AEW is offering is only to a certain extent. Because the other thing, too, is that, for NWA, it is the knowing what the pecking order is. But the door being open is what's good. Like AEW, they have the money, they have the TV time, so it is taking advantage of what they can get. Impact Wrestling, they've been a little more aggressive because they've gotten Kenny Omega. He's their world champion, and was on TV for months, and was featured in matches on their Impact pay-per-views, quite a few of them. So there was that. When you look at what Kenny Omega did, appearing, didn't he appear? Well, the match that he had was at Hard to Kill, and then they did Rebellion, and he had a match featured there, and then they had Slammiversary, he was featured there. But what's interesting was that the Impact Wrestling title was not, the title didn't change hands on Impact, it got changed on Dynamite, or should be on Rampage, which is important. The idea is that AEW is the exposure, the Forbidden Door. You want to go in the door, and the featured matches, the marquee is there because they have all the eyeballs. But what you're doing is you're infiltrating these other great stars from the other organizations to come into the mix. What I would think could be done at some point is Trevor Murdoch comes in to AEW or Impact defending the NWA title. I mean, I don't know. There's a thing I think where it's not where NWA stars are necessarily going to go into Impact. But I mean, I guess we're going to see that now. Because obviously Mickie James is going to infiltrate Augusta Deonna Purrazzo, and I'm guessing Bound for Glory. Those two are going to take heads. They're going to butt heads for the Impact World Title. And Deonna Purrazzo has held the belt on for a long period of time. So you got that. I think Bryan Danielson, I don't know if, I think there's just certain stars. I really feel like, I don't think Billy Corgan would take conventionally. I mean, even if he did have a Bryan Danielson or a CM Punk to work off of, I don't think he would say no, but I don't think it necessarily fits the mold of trying to be the traditional NWA. Like there is a style of wrestler that Billy Corgan does choose from. He does pick some stars that definitely have some star power, that have some kind of star power at some point in time. And they would fit a mold of a classic NWA in the 80s in a way. Like you kind of notice that part. I mean, when you look at the stars like a Trevor Murdoch or a Nick Aldis or like, I mean, I put it like this. If I think of like, you know, world-class championship wrestling, Nick Aldis to me kind of feels like a Chris Adams, a gentleman Chris Adams. And I don't remember if he ever worked in NWA. I'm not sure. Trevor Murdoch, he looks like Dick Murdoch. He looks like, you know, yeah, he does look like Dick Murdoch a lot. So you have that going for you. When you look at Aaron Stevens almost kind of gives me like a Larry Zbyszko vibe. Maybe even a bit of a Nick Bockwinkel kind of feel to, maybe not Nick Bockwinkel. That's not a good example. Tim Storm kind of feels like, well, I mean, remember they even had Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson at Rock and Roll Express working in NWA. And you can just see some similarities. Like a Cowboy James Storm kind of feels like, you know, it could be like almost like a, you know, pick like a Southern star that would have had, that would work well. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I don't know. There's just a thing where NWA had a certain caliber of stars that they would bring on board that would fit a certain role. Like a Tim Storm looks like a throwback. Trevor Murdoch looks like a throwback. Nick Aldis looks like a throwback. But Nick Aldis, with all due respect, I mean, Trevor Murdoch on Power this week, I got to see the promo from him as he was first chance to go and talk with the belt in his hand. Trevor Murdoch did a great job of putting over Nick Aldis huge because he deserves it. Nick Aldis, to his credit, was a fantastic NWA champion. I feel like he was, you could have put him at a pretty good, I don't know if he could ever fit the greats that held the NWA World Title. He's not Ric Flair. He's not Dusty Rhodes. I don't see him as Harley Race, who trained him. I mean, there's others I could think of as well, but I mean, don't get me wrong. Nick Aldis cuts a certain way and just had a total package with him. They have a very good faction with him in Strictly Business. It's a very cool faction together. And you look across the board, I'm like, he looked like $1 million. He carried himself so well, with such a prick heel on top of that, the way he did things. And you just see other stars they have. NWA just has a different feel to it. And I talked about that on the post show, which is why I don't think Danielson and Punk would be a match we would see in NWA. I think we would see I'll tell you like this, JB, a super card, much like what All In was. Much like, and I think that that's something they could build up to, is that they could do a stadium show as a super card. That's something I think is feasible. If there was a way to do what was like a Wrestle Rock or a Ring of Honor New Japan Supercard like they did, and they put it from a very well heralded place, and you put all these stars together, and you could put titles on the line, and you could do other things. I think doing a super card down the line, not right now, but maybe in another year, you could slate something like that for 2022. You could slate it for, I mean, you could take All In, it's going to be All Out next year, make it a super card. Maybe you don't hold it at the Now Arena in Chicago. Maybe you take that show to United Center and you bring a super card together. Like, I don't know. Or you just make a different show. Because right now, AEW is starting to pull some bigger arenas. They already did the United Center and they sold it out. They're consistently selling out the other smaller end arenas that are college arenas and getting their crowds back. And then let's see what Dynamite Grand Slam does, even though they have the vaccines, the vaccine proof that you have to have now to go to Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens when you want to go see that event in New York City. So there's that part. I think a super card could happen where you could put it in front of an audience. I don't know where you put it at, but a super card could be something that you could do. If that's something that could be put together, that AEW would kind of headline, and you would have other stars that would come in. You could have other titles to be defended, something like that. Maybe that's something they're going to do. A big ticket event that could be a real draw to the level of not a WrestleMania. They're not going to get that. But you could get a show that would be like a Royal Rumble style crowd or a SummerSlam style crowd where you could get a bigger arena. I don't think you could fill a stadium. I don't think they're capable of doing that with a super card. But you can lead up to that. That's something I think that can be done down the line. Now, moving along, he also says that I'm really going on in this thing. And he says that another thing that could happen is getting Epic Dream stables that could cross promotions. Because now the AEW titles and New Japan, NWA, AAA, Impact titles are all fair game. So stables have so many titles to go after that certain guys couldn't coexist before now. Put together guys that will want to go after all the gold in these various companies. Well, the Elite has already kind of spread itself out on Impact Wrestling to AEW. And same thing goes for New Japan. Like that is the ultimate stable that wants all the gold. That's it. I don't know if you have another stable that you create for that. And creating a super stable like that, there aren't any stables that NWA... I mean, NWA has a pretty good one in Strictly Business. Impact Wrestling does not. I mean, Violent by Design, they got some good workers in there, but it's not even close to what it could be. And I don't see any stables being created in Impact Wrestling. I don't think that's their kind of thing that much. Not really at all. And I mean, obviously AAA and New Japan have theirs. Those Ingobernables. They got AAA's got what's the new one that they put out there? And I forget the name of them because they brought them out during the. There was a couple of times they brought them out, and I forget the name of the faction they already have, but who they had out there, La Impresa. That's the one. That's the one that probably was the standout that was really like, that's the team that was trying to be really big. Puma King, Sam Adonis, DMT Azul. That was the one. So I feel like that was the one that probably stood out more than anything. Because that looks like, so they have one that's, I mean, there's other things they have, but I think that was the one that was their faction over there. There's not really that many factions that can be built up like a super faction that can really stand out. The Bullet Club is that one. The Elite is that. But I don't think they have anything else that could go higher than that. At one point, you could have the AEW World Champ, NWA World Champ, and IWGP Champ all in the same stable. In that same unit, have a tag team picking up gold all over the place. So he's really fantasy booking here. Now, he goes on to say that he agrees with me saying that AEW has more true main event talent than the WWE at this point. He lists CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Adam Page, Jon Moxley, Christian Cage, MJF, Cody Rhodes, Darby Allin. And this is what he says are the top 10 guys in AEW in no particular order. And he says he would take these 10 guys over 10 of WWE's top guys. And if you had to pick those 10, okay. And he also doesn't mention Malachi Black, Andrade El Idolo, Miro, Orange Cassidy, Eddie Kingston, Ricky Starks, Brian Cage, etc. Plus, he also mentions that it could be crazy that Bray Wyatt and Adam Cole could be on their way as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of talent right there. But you can't really judge them the same way. I mean, for me, WWE still has a massive roster. I mean, when you think about it, okay, to the top, Roman Reigns. You can always bring back John Cena in a pinch, it looks like. Brock Lesnar can come back. You got Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton. You could put Sheamus in there if you booked him right. That's a pretty good roster to me. Damn good. Big E you could put in there. I don't think he's that far off. Why they don't book him better, I don't know why. And there's others that they're trying to build up. But that's what it looks like is to me. They have a pretty damn good roster. And they have gone through a lot of change, WWE has done, because you could have put Braun Strowman or Bray Wyatt in there. You could have very well done that. But they changed. I mean, you would have had the 10. You would have had the 10 if you had what you had at the start of the year. Pretty much. That still is a pretty damn good roster. And, you know, I do think that they're actually, WWE is actually doing a good job building up Riddle. Damian Priest is starting to matter. I think he's starting to get a good rub. The U.S. title means something because Riddle had that same kind of rub this time last year, where he was U.S. champion, and then building him up. And now it goes to tag team titles. So there's that to work off of. They're going to repackage Keith Lee, make him a heel. They're already making their tweak. They're already making major wholesale changes to Karrion Kross. And, you know, there's obviously you could say the Usos could always be done something more because you did give them some time to have a little bit of a. You had Jey Uso go with a little bit of a singles run and did very well. But yeah, there's quite a few names you have right now. WWE is not going to lose anything right now. Okay. AEW's tag division smokes WWE. Yeah. But tag team's not a priority there. It kind of was. It was a time where, I mean, they still have the Usos. They still have the New Day. I mean, and unfortunately, you had some tag teams that really were just stand out. Viking Raiders, just poorly used. I just don't get it. And, you know, I mean, Street Profits could have been booked better too, but they're also kind of hurting. Like, they have tag teams, but they're just really filler. They don't really make much of a difference, you know, moving the needle at all for them. Well, he says WWE's women's division is superior as of now, but you know they're obviously they're stacked, and they have a lot of women at NXT they could bring up right now if they want to. Raquel Gonzalez could be brought up pretty quickly. Io Shirai could be brought up. You could go that route. Frankie Monet is a no-brainer to me. And there's probably a couple of the names I wouldn't say right now that are like right there yet, but there's a lot of good women talent there. And I think that's the one thing that we'll get is that when NXT does make its wholesale change and brightens up and completely rebuilds itself. And the indies, I mean, there's certain stars. There's really not a WWE style necessarily for the women because the women are not going over the top, going with like overly high risk moves. I think there's not so much that. Like the women kind of get a little more room to move, to me anyway. So I could see that part, and then eventually you see what happens when because I mean that's what it feels like to me. That the women's division doesn't have the kind of restrictions or the kind of standards that are expected. Because, I mean, part of it too is that I think you don't necessarily have a lot of, diva-like stars in NXT. That's part where they're going to definitely go now going forward. But, you're not going to go bad with Raquel Gonzalez. She's a very attractive young lady. Shirai is extremely attractive. Like you're going to have the appeal, the visual is going to be there along with the work and the bodies. Like these girls are not. There are no women being brought in that are like in really bad shape at all, unless it's a purpose. Like for the most part, you're getting all the girls that are coming in. They're all in amazing shape. That's the ones they're picking. Even when it was NXT, the way Triple H has it, with William Regal and the rest. Now, JB continues and says that largely because of the way the WWE is presenting their guys and what AEW has done in their run already has smoked what TNA did. Well, okay. And he says TNA had a prime opportunity, but they blew it. AEW helping boost other companies instead of killing them off could eventually be their biggest legacy. Let me unpack some of that right there. And for me, still, I think there's got to be a lot to be said that the Impact Wrestling Knockouts roster is underrated. I keep saying that over and over. When you look at that, it's a pretty good roster, all right? Deonna Purrazzo is a great Knockouts champion. You take Jordan Grace, Rachel Ellering, Rosemary, Havoc, Tennille Dashwood, Madison Rayne, Taylor Wilde. It's pretty stacked. There's Tasha Steelz. It's not a bad roster at all. It's actually it's pretty decent. And they can always bring other stars they bring in that they always do well with. And AEW, to the credit, they have quite a few stars, but they're all trying to build other stars that they have. Because AEW, they don't have a good lock net yet on a women's division that really stands out. And they're not willing to go ahead and just take certain stars and just keep them in. Like Red Velvet is a bit of a project. Like she got a great look. And she definitely fits the kind of like trying to fit a good mix of stars in the women's division where you want, I guess what they're trying to do is really have a lot of representation of different cultures, creeds, races, things like that. I mean, that's the one thing they also have. They have quite a lot of stars that are, when you look at Nyla Rose being, like a standout or a Big Swole, or then you look at different ethnicities when you look at Ty Conti, or, there's just something there where they're trying to make a mix of everybody. And there's just good names in there, like Britt Baker's been a standout. Chris Statlander's very good. Then you go to Ty Conti. Anna Jay, I think, wasn't really that bad. I'm glad she's back finally from her injury. It took a long time for her to come back, unfortunately. But good to see her back. Jade Cargill definitely has the makings of being a real star. Like, just promos are very good. The lawyers were very good. Just a good look. Nyla Rose, off and on. Hikaru Shida was very good as champion. But, the run was done. Like, she already had run through everybody that there was. And she still is a very solid name to have on the roster. And they found their way somewhat. Like, it's still not perfect, but they are trying so many different stars to try to get them up and get them going somewhere with a Julia Hart or a Layla Hirsch. And then every women's wrestler they have that gets on Dark and Dark Elevation. Like, I look at those matches, and they have a lot of stars that come in. They're trying to bring out and to see what happens with them. Penelope Ford. There's a lot of people they have. There's a lot of women in there. They just have to go and kind of filter out who's going to come out from the pack. But that women's division has taken some time for them to go ahead and take off. It's taken some time. And also keep in mind that Ring of Honor has quite a bit of a women's division they're trying to do for their tournament. That's going to definitely make a different thing. The other thing I think that people got to consider too is that, when NXT does make their change, is there's going to be any stars that will be let go that will eventually get brought over. And by the way, AEW having Kiera Hogan was a big plus for them. She's great. Great. I love her. Now, when NXT does make their change, You wonder if it's going to be any of those women wrestlers that are going to be brought up, they're going to be let go. If there's any more releases that will happen on that end, and which those women will then filter into other organizations. It's just the AEW's got to figure out. They got to get themselves around a couple of people that are going to really stand out. Plus, the other problem is that some of their stars have gotten hurt. And that's kind of been some bad work in ring, and just the durability of these women wrestlers for what they're having to do, because they're really putting themselves into some moves that are really, there's a lot of work to be done. But then again, you also have to imagine that WWE does have a really good women's division. Still is. Becky, Sasha, Bianca, Charlotte. I mean, that's, the nucleus right there. Then under that, you have a pretty good tier. You could say Naomi. I would put Carmella in that same picture. And definitely Bianca Belair has now stepped up to the level of the main four that really were part of that Give Divas a Chance section. I think she's there. Rhea Ripley is in that second tier. Nikki ASH is in that second tier. And then after that, you just have, whatever you have left, like a Naomi, to me, like a Natalya or Tamina and stars like that. So, but across the board, AEW still needs some work on their roster. They're working on it. They do have quite a few main event players that are really strong. Tag team's very strong. Like what was being done by the EVPs to really build up. And they do have a lot of stars that they can work in Dark Elevation that are not bad. Like those shows are not bad. I mean, the stars they have over there are not too bad. Some tag teams that are building up are not bad. Like Private Party's been around. They've got their time in there. 2.0 is actually a pretty interesting team they have now. The Acclaimed, Varsity Blondes. Like they're definitely building young tag teams so that the Young Bucks are not going to be out there, 10 years later having to still ring this up. And then underneath, Kenny Omega or Chris Jericho. I mean, look at the stars you have when it comes to Darby Allin, MJF, Orange Cassidy, Jungle Boy. Those are that's the future that they want to definitely build up. Meanwhile, to build that brand up and to keep it where it's at a certain level that everybody benefits is when you have legends like Punk, Danielson, Jericho, Christian, John Moxley in there, Cody Rhodes to an extent. That's who you got, and that's very important. And Adam Page also already of the future, but I think it's just a matter of time before they crown him world champion. That guy's going to be world champion someday. I feel like that's what's going to happen with that too. So I appreciate JB putting the comments out there. Gave me something to really work off of. And I think he's not far off in what he was saying when it comes to this. A different perspective of the new Wrestling Alliance. Because it does create that fantasy booking. Can you do that right now in WWE right now? Right? I mean, when you think about it, I was hearing JD from NY206 and his Off the Script show trying to fantasy book what's coming up when you're looking up the WrestleMania next year. Okay, so you could put Lashley eventually down the line against Lesnar, and you hope that would be a match that they put together at WrestleMania next year, and Rock and Reigns at WrestleMania next year for Texas Stadium. I mean, that's as far as the fantasy booking really goes. But when you look at what the new Wrestling Alliance does, you're fantasy booking like crazy, which is just fodder. It's just red meat for all these IWC fans. This is where they're getting their fun. And more people are paying attention because some of the stars that are such standouts, the ones that they were, they were praising like crazy, the underdogs of the WWE, that's what this is. The stars that have been going over to AEW and working in other organizations are ultimately underdogs. CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, you look at John Moxley, you look at Malachi Black, Andrade El Idolo, Pac, Miro, they're essentially underdogs. Essentially. And those are the stars that they're looking at. They're like, these are the guys that could have made something of themselves in WWE if they would have done them right. So this is the underdog organization. The dark horse. And as for me, this is like a good sports fan, right? There are sports fans that love the big leagues. They love the teams that are always going to be up at the top, right? If you're a baseball fan, you always expect the Yankees or the Dodgers to be up near the top and contending for a pennant and the World Series, right? If you're looking at football, you expect the Patriots, not now, but at one point, you could say the Cowboys or the 49ers, right? Or the Giants or the Jets. Or not the Jets, the Giants. Those teams, or the Redskins. Those are always teams that always have the high expectations. They're the best. The Steelers, one other great example. Those are the teams that are always supposed to be above and beyond. That's the teams that like everybody has to root for. Everybody has their merch, all that stuff. And then you have the teams that are not the major markets, the smaller market teams. They're playing money ball. They have good players on the teams, and they are on the outside looking in. They're not the odds-on favorites. They are the underdogs to succeed to winning a championship, to overall being the winners. So when you're betting who's going to do better in the world of wrestling, if you're going to be like, you want to go for the ones that are the sure thing, that are going to make money, the ones that are going to be around forever, it's WWE. I mean, AEW has definitely been putting down some anchors to make sure they're staying afloat. And in the meantime, with their success, they are not so much as a olive branch working with these organizations. Part of it is. But part of it for them is that in order to build their brand, they're going to use the help of the stars of these other organizations. And getting their stars featured on their programming so that those other audiences will all together. Every one of those organizations, whether it's Impact, MLW, Ring of Honor, AAA, New Japan, all those, they will all culminate to AEW as the one true brand where all the major things happen. Meanwhile, great things happen among their own respective brands. But as a collective, as an association, as a new wrestling alliance, AEW has the spotlight, so people are going to be drawn to go to that spotlight until their spotlights get brighter on them. So for Impact Wrestling to have the relationship they have with AEW, it's just for the fact that, hey, it's like JB said, TNA blew it. But they were deemed to fail. Aces and eights. Jeff Hardy is a heel champion. Immortal. Having all the things that they did with it. The Main Event Mafia. I mean, the factions, the stars they brought back in to the fold. I mean, you brought in a lot of people that had some spurts of greatness. That putting them together, you did it in WCW. It ultimately took the ship down because it was not well managed. Like, you didn't have anybody that was able to go and stay in TNA to manage this ship from repeating the same thing that WCW did. And you were doing it with less the budget. But sure, hey, TNA was able to get some bigger arenas. They had Hulk Hogan out there. They had Booker T. They had Kurt Angle. They had Sting. You had Ric Flair out there. You had Mick Foley out there. And, Bischoff was running out things, working in some capacity. Vince Russo writing for them. Jeff Jarrett. Was a lot there. Like, there's a lot of things you could think they could make this a go. And they were all motivated to make a go a second time against WWE. I mean, more than anything, Tony Khan He learned from the mistakes that TNA and WCW made collectively. There's so much to learn from those experiences. He's a smart investor. Plus, it's not like Eric Bischoff using Warner or Turner or Ted Turner's money. Like he was just using a checkbook. Tony Khan, it's also his millions on the line. So it's his money putting in. With Dixie Carter, she was spending her daddy's money, Bob Carter's money, Pan Anderson's money. It was a different story. Like the personal risk being put in by Tony Khan keeps him sharp, keeps him focused. That's what it comes down to, which is smart. With TNA, Scott D'Amore, Ed Norholm, the Anthem team, they had to learn what happened with TNA. And I think there's a very good way of slowly but surely trying to build that Impact Wrestling audience back. I mean, Impact Wrestling is starting to make their way back up. Are they pulling the kind of numbers they've had before? No, but they are at least getting themselves back on the needle again. When you look what they're doing, the numbers are still not great. I mean, they did have a point where at the beginning of the storyline with Kenny Omega, it definitely didn't stand out. Since July, since that last bad rating, they had a 69,000 that was registered. Between 120, usually about 110, 120,000. Not so much last week, 98,000 for their show last week. But still, being able to go and get over 100,000 viewers. But it's going to take them some time to build some other stars to work off of, because then you have stars that were there and then stars that left. I mean, that's what's going on there. Is that they have some stars that are there that just don't have that kind of, that pull, that kind of just that, what's going to make a difference. They don't have that yet. You have to work on it. They don't have the luxury like a CM Punk or Bryan Danielson coming into AEW, which really hits a spike on the ratings. Like, I mean, when you're seeing almost another 150,000 viewers solely for CM Punk, that's casual fans from WWE coming in to watch, or other ones that are out there. And I think what's going to have to happen at somewhere down the line with all these different stars, with a CM Punk or Bryan Danielson being brought in, and who knows if Adam Cole makes their way in, you're going to start eventually seeing some casual WWE fans that are going to eventually start watching the other show, because it's available to watch on Wednesday and Friday. They're going to start watching a bit. And they're going to start saying to themselves, okay, let's look at what's going on here. And they're going to start paying attention. Right? That's what's going to happen. They will start paying attention a little bit more. And they'll start, because they hate the brand because of what it does to what they think is hurting WWE, then they're going to start looking at the brand and they're going to say something about it. So, yeah, that's how they're going to feel. Whatever. Okay. So I got about another 7-8 minutes before I'm going to wrap this up, because I want to get done in 60 minutes. So I got a few more things to bring up before we're going to wrap things up that we should talk about that happened. Because WWE has had their issues. Now, there's a few things that CM Punk did talk about this week on Busted Open that I thought was significant. I want to just highlight a couple of things, because there's a whole lot to be said. Take a look at the link for yourself from PW Torch. He did put a lot out there and said a lot of what was going on. Mentioning the fact that there's a distinction when it comes to the other place, which he's referring to WWE, right? Will tell you and beat you over the head. Hey, we're not pro wrestling. So why do you want to go to bat for that company and say it is? And then he mentioned that, being hurt and how he was going through in WWE, right? The fact that he says that he calls himself a cycle breaker, leaving the situation he had over there. He was proud of himself for taking a step back, telling himself the WWE wouldn't listen to him, even though he's sick and hurt, and that he needed to take care of himself. He says it sounds dramatic, but it's not bullshit. He wanted to be able to kiss his wife and walk his dog before imploring everyone to do what's best for you. Also, one thing I thought was really cool is the fact that Tommy Dreamer offered praise to Punk as a Dusty Rhodes or Ricky Morton level babyface, how the fans needed closure. Getting a stamp of approval from legends like Dusty Rhodes and Harley Race, only to be told he's nothing and will never make it, how outlets like ESPN covered Punk's AEW debut and return to professional wrestling. It's a lot that was said in that interview. It was really good. So I wanted to bring that up. Next, we got to talk about what happened with the match that was going on. What happened on Raw this Monday night, which, I'm not going to take much time to talk about it, but there's a number of things that happened as a result of what's going on that Vince was not happy about. And that was being reported as well. So let's bring that up real quick. WrestlingNews.co, I had taken this from, as always, reported to be loud and angry, and that he ripped up the Raw script several times. So there were segments that were advertised that did not happen. Miz and Morrison was a match that was supposed to happen, did not happen. Also, Alexa Bliss was supposed to appear, and she was not on either. Charlotte was supposed to have some confrontation with Alexa Bliss, but then now Nia Jax took on Charlotte Flair, which we'll talk about in a moment. PW Insider reporting that yesterday was one of the longest days for the creative team because Vince McMahon was said to be extremely unhappy with what was originally planned for the show. Ripping the script several times, asked for new ideas on the fly. Some of those ideas were said to be good, others not so good, but he rejected all of them before he decided on what the new plans would be. At 6 p.m. Eastern, there had not been an official decision to what would be happening, which is why so much disappeared from the Raw review page on the website. One source told PWI it was the loudest and angriest he had ever seen McMahon on the day of the show. And the ratings took a hit. Below 2 million viewers. You could tell there was a little bit of a shakeup. One of the matches they had that was really there was Charlotte Flair and Nia Jax, which looked like it was an actual shoot. You saw some real crap going on. Now, the action between the Raw Women's Champion Jax broke down, appeared to be a legitimate fight at one point. Both competitors shoe striking each other in the middle of their bout. And PW Insider confirmed with sources in the company that what the watching audience saw happen is exactly what went down. The match between Flair and Jax when Ari led the duo to having a legitimate confrontation with each other, slaps and punches being thrown by both individuals during the exchange. And Jax and Flair were able to get back on the same page. The match ended in the manner that had been booked. Jax winning and pinning the women's champion, which most likely means she's going to get a chance to go after Charlotte Flair at whatever was being put into. The incident's being put down to a breakdown of communication between the duo. Also been reported there were no issues backstage between Flair and Jax after the match had finished. I think Bully Ray on Busted Open put a point saying that however this was going on, Nia Jax, she doesn't sound like she's got a good reputation in the locker room. And she's been sloppy with a number of wrestlers getting them hurt. And with Charlotte Flair having to go and take this match instead of Alexa Bliss, probably would have been a better match for Alexa Bliss than Charlotte Flair, but we didn't get that. And Nia Jax coming out because Nia Jax holding a lot of girth, trying to go move around in the ring, getting blown up. Charlotte Flair taking advantage of that, which I totally believe was one of the things that she was trying to do. One other thing I got to bring up here is a story about NXT. Now, by the way, they got a couple of signees that they signed at the Performance Center. Who was it? Joseph Fatu, not Jacob Fatu, but Joseph Fatu, the younger brother of the Usos, has joined, and Gable Stevenson's brother, the Olympic wrestler, and a few other people were brought on board to join, but nobody from the Indies necessarily. They're really just all prospects. So NXT will no longer be in the form that it is. We know that. Changes are going to be made. Nick Khan made it apparent. We got that. So Wrestling Observer Live, Brian Alvarez had heard from people saying in the company, NXT will be produced by Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard. And Alvarez says, like anything can change, anything is possible, but I talked a while ago about how we're going to have a new NXT. It's going to be like the old NXT. I've heard from several people that when they get back to live shows, this will be Vince and Bruce running the show. The plan is for a complete overhaul of the brand. Last Friday, they introduced a logo with music provided by Wale. When they go live on September 14th, fans will see a new performance center, NXT is expected to have different lighting and colors because McMahon wanted to get rid of the dark look. The other big change on the show will be with the talent. The plan is to sign younger talent and fewer names from the indie scene. And Alvarez says that for people speculated for years that McMahon had his fingerprints on the show. Well, it was never the case, but now it's going to be. That's the idea. And that sounds like what they're going to do. And now I'm going to go and wrap things up. All Out, the pay-per-view this weekend. I want to do some predictions, so I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think CM Punk beats Darby Allin. I think Moxley beats Kojima. I think Paul White wins over QT Marshall. Miro retains the AEW TNT title. I'll take Thunder Rosa to win the Casino Battle Royal. I'll take MJF to win over Chris Jericho. I think that's what's going to happen. I think Jericho's going to take some time, step back, and he'll do announcing on Rampage. Like, he's not going to go away, but he won't wrestle. Maybe somewhere down the line they'll do something with that. And I think that'll be a stipulation they'll actually try to work off of or something. I'm not sure what they'll do. I think, man, it's going to be tough to say about Young Bucks and Lucha Brothers. I think Young Bucks will retain. You know what? I'm going to go against. I'll say Lucha Brothers win. Steel cage match for the World Tag Team titles. Britt Baker, I think, will retain over Chris Statlander. And Kenny Omega will beat Christian Cage. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of title changes. Maybe one, and I think MJF does get the upset over Jericho. Because MJF just becoming more powerful and more dominant as we go along. That's where I think things will go. So come back this Sunday as we will talk about All Out, which looks like a great event coming up this weekend. And we'll talk about that after the show's done here on the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at wrestlingisreal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.